So the biggest thing that I see with parents and even with my own parents when they watch my daughter is that pressure generates counter pressure. If you put pressure on a child to eat vegetables, they're going to push back. It's completely ineffective and counterproductive to pressure a child to eat.
Welcome to the Dad Central Show, hosted by Ed Gow Jr. and Drew Solon. We know dads want to see their kids succeed, but they don't always know how to get there. This show gives dads the tools they need to raise confident and successful kids.
What is up, everybody? It's Ed Gow Jr. of Dad Central and the Dad Central Show, and this guy. I was going to come up with something different. So I said, let me make it just short and sweet. This guy.
For those who are listening in the audio, you always wonder, what's going on there? Ed is we're side by side on the screen, and he always points the opposite direction, to nobody. So, yeah, Drew Solon, Dad Central, and of the Dad Central Show. So welcome again to another show. And Ed, how are you?
I am outstanding. Before we started this conversation today, I was saying I'm enjoying doing some recording and having the window open, fresh breeze, where I'm in the Greater Toronto area for about the last week or so. We just had really nice weather. And if you want, you can go out in shorts. Not at night, it's a little cool, but during the daytime, you can go out in shorts, some people wear t-shirts. I like to wear like a half zip and just enjoy, because I know with the days getting shorter and the sun setting earlier, some cold weather's around the corner, but it's nice to just enjoy the lovely, lovely fall. So what about you? Don't talk about what?
So let's just enjoy what we got right now.
Okay.
I don't want to think about it not being here because I'm not a winter fan. How am I? Every now and then it gets a little hectic with 5 kids. And
you're kidding.
Yeah. Recently, I wanted to get the kids out of the house, and it was around dinner time. And I was like, all right, let's go. We're getting out. And I left Kristen home with the baby so we could, I could create some space for her. And the kids were, oh, Dad, let's go to, I used to take my kids to Costco. Snacks are great at Costco. They just kind of sample. We have a great time. Anyways,
you're setting up for our new friend today, but keep on going.
Yeah. So at the end, Sophia always, can we get a Costco hot dog? And the answer was yes. And then we all got Costco, not me. They all got Costco hot dogs. I have this great picture of them sitting on the bank, behind the car, because we all just went outside, loaded the car, and they're just sitting there. And it's a moment of bliss as they're chewing on their hot dog with their fountain drink. And I just think, I'm a good dad today. Yeah, because they gave Kristen space. I had some peace. We had some fun, and I thought, they are happy as can be. And yeah, of course, you know why I'm telling this story, because we're talking to somebody new today who may get me in a little trouble for that story. I think for me, it's a dad win.
It's a dad win. Yes. Okay. Before we see if we can get Drew out of trouble, let's talk about this. The Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there is a positive impact. And it's interesting that Drew's mentioning that story. After one of our most recent recordings, we always chat after. And I've shared with Drew, I'm a little bit in a eating and nutritional transformation. So last night I had a green smoothie. And so what is in a green smoothie? I just took bunches of leaf lettuce, put in some almond milk, a little bit of a drop of coconut water, and that's what I had for dinner.
You're trying to score points, maybe.
I'm trying to get some shine on you because I know you're going to get some in the next few moments. So I'm trying to lighten your load.
I see how it goes. Okay. Well,
I'm trying to watch your back.
our guest today. We're talking to Anneke Hobson. She is a registered dietitian, and she goes by the name the Kiwi RD. And you get to learn why later. But she's been working with families and eventually now actually seeing a lot more dads in her practice. So, Anneke, welcome to the show. We're looking forward to learn a little bit more about what you do, but also the importance of how dads can help their kids when it comes to eating, maybe even helping themselves a little bit. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks. Thanks so much for having me. I love both of your stories, actually. I love that moment of sharing a hot dog with your kids. I think it's great.
Okay, but you know what? If I don't know if she would have still said that if I didn't add in my green smoothie. You never know. You never know. You never know. But it's great. Anneke, we are so excited to have you, especially as we're talking. Well, in this part of the world, fall season is changing things, and a lot of times during the summertime, we sort of let go of our eating habits. So I'm really interested to hear about what you do. But most of all, let's hear a little backstory about Anneke. How did you get into this world of nutrition?
Yeah. So it's kind of a long story, but I'll tell you a story that kind of really got me passionate about feeding kids and kind of doing it in a positive way. And I can get into why that's really important for dads later. But yeah, for now, I'll just tell the story. So when I was 17, I went to Italy. I was an au pair, which is just a fancy word for a full-time nanny for these two boys. There were 2 and 4. And neither of them ate very much, which stressed me out as a 17-year-old. But the 2-year-old especially just would not eat. And so, I had this experience, which was honestly a little bit traumatizing. So there was another nanny who would kind of watch me try to convince this 2-year-old to eat something, eat some veggies, eat some meat, anything, and him just refusing. And so she would try to take over from me. And she just was much more aggressive and would offer him the forkful of food. And if he refused, then she would hit him. And so basically, eventually, he would just cave. And so what he would do is he would squirrel food away in his cheeks. And so sometimes, I would go to wake him up in the morning and he'd have all this chicken like in his cheeks. Obviously, really not great for like a long-term relationship with food as he gets older, and just, all kinds of other, like a choking hazard and not good for your teeth. And anyway, I'm just telling this story because basically, I think that was really formative for my interest and care in helping parents to feed their kids in a more positive way. So I got into nutrition and became a dietitian. And whenever I took a course on feeding kids, that story really stuck with me, because that 2-year-old really began to associate food with pain. And so as a result, became even less willing to eat. So yeah, that's really where my passion comes from. And yeah, why I like to kind of counsel parents and give them some support in how to feed kids in a positive and healthy way, so that they have this longer term healthy relationship with food, as well as that nutrition that they need to grow. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing the story. And certainly you can see how that could be formative for sure. Yeah. One of the things you talked about that I think is really important, though, is a healthy relationship with food. And I think for me, you're a registered dietitian, but you talked about associating food with pain, but I think there's also associating food with pleasure and maybe all things in between. And so maybe could you talk a little bit about, from your perspective, how do we develop healthy relationship with food? And then how does that play into, I guess, our role as parents?
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I think it's something that, like the world of psychology and other kind of fields are starting to pull together and piece together. But basically, a healthy relationship with food really rests on kind of your childhood and how you grew up with food, and a few kind of pieces. So the food environment, so what kinds of foods you were exposed to as a child, the parenting style, so were you kind of commanded to eat or told, you have to finish your plate before you leave the table, all that kind of stuff. teaches us to override like what our bodies are telling us, how hungry or full we feel. And instead, we get these messages from parents saying you have to keep eating or you have to stop eating and you cannot have any more. Food as punishment, food as kind of reward or like a bribe. So all these different pieces really paint a picture of what your relationship with food looks like as an adult. So one piece that I'll just mention from that we were kind of learning about the research is that a dad's dietary habits or food behaviors and attitudes can really impact kids' behaviors and attitudes. So actually more so than a mom's. It's really interesting. So yeah, what a dad does in a family or in a house can really impact the way that a child learns to eat and what that relationship with food looks like as they get older. So yeah, that was really a new learning for me actually after coming to see one of your presentations, Drew, was, what does it mean for a dad to eat well and model that in a household? And it turns out it means a lot, more than I think we've given credit for in the past. So
I want to jump in for just a second. You mentioned about the impact on how parents and dads are raised when it comes to food. Can you delve a little deeper on that? Because you were reading my alleged mind. I was going to ask on that, but if you can delve a little deeper on that, it'd be fantastic.
Yeah. So you might have noticed, or your listeners might have noticed kind of in general with parenting, that we get these messages as kids from our own parents, and then we repeat them to our own kids when we become parents. So it's really, really easy to just, if you're on kind of default, to repeat the messages that your parents gave you about food. So that's a big one. Another kind of common finding from the research is that dads tend to use more command and control, it's sometimes called, in terms of feeding. So setting food rules and then just kind of telling kids how to eat or what to eat, when actually that's not effective. So if you can think of like the example that came to mind when I was thinking about this podcast is cursing. So before I became a parent, I cursed quite liberally for various reasons. But when I became a parent, just thinking like, I can't just tell my kid don't curse when I myself am continuing to curse. Kids pick up on that. They pick up on the fact that you're not behaving in the way that you're professing that you should be behaving. So you have to instead really be this role model. And so that role modeling is really where things get passed on, for dads and for moms, for all of us. But I think that, things like eating and those food rules, whatever they were for you as a kid, the role modeling is what comes through generations. So it's had to disrupt. It's had to think, this is what my parents taught me. It's not necessarily what I want to teach my kids. I'm going to make an effort to, whatever it is, quit smoking or stop cursing or eat a little bit healthier or, not set these really strict kind of demands around food on my kids. So that was a little bit rambly, but I hope it answered like that question of passing on what your parents have passed to you.
Yeah, so two key things. One, dads, your example. Well, dads are really important actually in helping children when it comes to a relationship with food and how they view food and how they're going to consume their food. Mm-hmm. And second is the example that a dad sets is very powerful and more powerful than using our traditional command and control approach when it comes to food. So maybe I'm in trouble for taking the kids to Costco for the Costco hot dog because, Kristen doesn't really support the Costco hot dog, but meaning she knows it's a very rare experience. But
can I give two thoughts about that?
Yes,
Costco
go right
experience?
ahead.
Okay,
and we can have a conversation about it for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So the first is that part of that command and control approach is really controlling and micromanaging what your kids eat. So with the best of intentions, parents sometimes think, I'm never going to let my kids have hot dogs. But if you have ever been on a diet yourself and have tried to set up these food rules, like I can never eat hot dogs, you'll know that that rule sometimes gives that food a special value or importance and makes it really exciting and forbidden. And so what I really love about taking your kids to Costco for a nice afternoon, I just think you're showing your kids that you like hot dogs are a yummy food that you can enjoy together, knowing that it's not an everyday food, but still just simply enjoying it as like a food that gives us pleasure. And pleasure, like food pleasure, is a big part of like enjoying our lives. So I think that I really, really like that hot dog example because it's not making hot dogs this kind of forbidden food, but instead really just enjoying it for what it is. The other thing that I'll point out is another thing from the research that I've picked up on is it's called parenting congruence. So you mentioned that your wife doesn't like it when you give your kids hot dogs. But actually, we know that kids do the best when both parents are kind of taking at least a similar approach, or that they are in agreement about the way you're going to feed your kids or what kinds of foods are allowed and not allowed. So yeah, getting both parents kind of on board with whatever the thing is still important, even if it's something that you wouldn't typically do. So I hope that makes sense, that kind of teamwork from, mothers and fathers. Yeah.
I think that's so well said. By the way, I'll have to double check with her. I'm pretty sure I asked permission first. You okay? Listen, we're going to go to Costco. Yes, I'm going to get him a hot dog. So I think I got the okay as far as on the same page, but I agree with you 100% because that can be another source of conflict, right? Mm-hmm. Conflict over styles or expectations. And there can also be opportunities for a lot of undermining. So if I was just like, hey, kids, we're going, and they're like, well, but mommy doesn't want us to have a hot dog. Don't worry about it. Like, we'll have a hot dog. Just don't tell her. I think that's really unhealthy because I think that creates undermining. And it creates a distrust of like, well, we can't trust the mom does. Dad will go do whatever he wants, but he won't listen to mom on this. So I agree with you 100%. I did get the permission and the A-OK that we're going to go and have this special treat. I do really think your point's very important, though, as far as not having this forbidden thing, because then it takes on this heightened level of, I got to have it then, as opposed to just a healthy, balanced relationship. I'm going to go, we're going to have it. We have it like once every, 3, 5, 4 months. Like it's not an everyday thing. So anyways, it's a really important point. I'll stop talking now because it's about you. Ed.
Okay. I'm curious, and you're so good to let Drew off the hook. I know he's gonna love you forever now. So it's all good. I don't know about Kristen. I don't know when Kristen watches this. I'd like to see that conversation out, but that's a whole other thing. How did you approach or transition working with fathers or dads when it came to nutrition? I'm very curious because it's something that it came to you or you approached them.
That is such a good question. Okay, so I've been a dietitian for about 6 years. I worked in public health before opening my own practice, but it's something that has bothered me ever since I started nutrition. So I think something like 98% of dietitians are female, which I don't think is great. Like, I think we need more male dietitians to reach males. Like, it's a big problem. But then, there's kind of just been this ongoing kind of subconscious things that I've noticed about the way. So like, for example, at public health, we would run these health campaigns like choose water over sugary drinks or, whatever message it was. Yeah. Nice work.
More brownie
points for the water. So say we want to run a campaign like that, choose water. And we go through Facebook. So we do a little Facebook ad. Facebook sends us all these analytics about who the ad has reached. And it was always, 95% female. And I don't know why that is. Like, maybe it's that women are more likely to look for parenting content on Facebook or look at it or something. But I also think maybe Facebook has this bias, like, oh, look, we should be targeting women because women are mothers.
Algorithm.
Yes, it's already pre-set up to favor exposing mothers to this nutrition content about feeding kids and not fathers. And so, just a lot of that stuff has kind of popped up in my career as a dietitian and has really bothered me. And I recently actually, for International Women's Day, I had wanted to post something on my private practice social media about women, mothers and fathers, and the kind of work of food. So I found this very old stat from Statistics Canada. I think it was from 2012 or 2015 or something like that. And it showed that a small majority, so around 60% of the food labor is still done by women, not men. So actually, it's an area where a lot of progress has been made. A lot more dads and men are doing food work. They're doing cooking, but yet still seems to be majority women. But I think that part of that is cultural and part of it is just simply that like a lot of healthcare providers and public health campaigns and research targets women and not men. And so men are kind of just by default like being excluded from nutrition and food messaging and parenting messaging. And that really bothers me too. Like I think that we should be including everybody. So yeah, anyway, just a few things that have kind of gone on. And then I saw Drew's presentation at a group one evening about 2 months ago, I think it was. And it really just blew my mind, honestly. A lot of the facts about dads I had misconceptions about. And yeah, it really just helped me think more about dads and feeding kids. And so that's when I did a bunch of this research and wanted to come on the podcast. But yeah, those are the highlights.
I love that you are, it sounds like from just you sharing, you're a very curious individual.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that curiosity took you to where we are today. So that's good stuff, Drew.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that. And to me, that is something that we knew from the research as well, that dads often aren't included in some of these important points. And so, but you're working with families, you're working with young families or new families, and, it can be challenging. Kristen, with her first daughter, Sophia, had a terrible time getting her to eat food. And so, whether that's being picky or just even eating. So can you, that seems to be a problem. Can you talk about maybe the problem that you see or the challenges that you see in parents or young families who are just, getting started? And then how do you work with them? How do you help them?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so common, first of all. So if you're struggling with picky eating, then you're far from alone. The majority of parents really do struggle, whether that's really picky eating or just kind of a perception that, they're not eating enough or they're not eating the right kinds of food. So common. In terms of the way that I work, so there's kind of the two parts of setting up things to facilitate healthy eating and a healthy relationship with food. One is the eating environment. So that could include literally just what kinds of foods do you offer your kids and what kinds of foods do you, yourselves eat as parents. And then the other is the role modeling. So yeah, what kinds of foods are parents eating? What, how are they eating? Are you, forbidding cookies and then sneaking cookies in the pantry while your kids aren't looking? Or are you, simply making them available like as a treat once in a while in a neutral way? So those are really the two things that can actually make a big difference. So I'll give you one kind of example of like a psychological thing that can build. It's just called repeated neutral exposure. So it's a psychological thing that our brains tend to like the things that we're exposed to over and over. So the example that I always think of is like hearing a song on the radio. So often a song comes on the radio. I've never heard it before. I go, turn it off. But if it comes on day after day, after a while, I'm like singing along to the song.
That's why they call it radio programming.
Right. Right. Yeah. So it's just simply that we tend to like things that we're exposed to more. It doesn't mean that the more we're exposed to something, we'll definitely start to like it. But for most things, the more we're exposed to it, the more we'll accept it and like it. So the approach for like young kids, so this would be like toddlers through maybe like 7 or 8 year olds, is just called repeated neutral exposure. So this means putting a small amount of whatever the food is. So say you're trying to get your kids to eat carrots. It would be a small amount of that food, like maybe even a tablespoon or like 1 carrot stick on the side of their plate in a neutral way. So no pressure, no bribing, no rewards for eating, or even praise for eating the carrot. It's just there, and maybe they'll touch it, maybe they'll sniff it, maybe they'll play with it. Maybe they won't eat it, but over time, they will just accept that there are carrots sometimes, and they'll just start to try it. So this does take time and patience. And what I will say that I notice a lot in practice from parents is the emotional component. So if it's okay, I can talk a little bit about what can happen. Okay. So it's really, really common to have conflict over what to eat and how much to eat at meal times. And I think my kind of suspicion is that it's based on a fear. So parents have this fear that their kids are not eating enough, or they're not eating right, and that, they should be eating more or vegetables or whatever. So that fear can cause this like escalation in the conflict, where it gets more and more stressful for both the parents and the kids. So some of the things parents can sometimes just feel like, I cooked this food and you're not grateful for it. You didn't even touch it. And it can get really frustrating and stressful. And that escalates the conflict for both parents and kids. So kids will start to feel like, I don't even want to come to the table because it's so stressful, and my mom is just forcing me to eat these carrots, or, really pressuring me to eat carrots. So that escalation and conflict is where I try to intervene and just kind of bring down the stress level and that emotional reaction to kind of stop that fight from getting worse. So yeah, really noticing your emotions, like, okay, I'm feeling really angry, I'm feeling really frustrated, but actually it's okay if they don't eat this meal. They will eat soon, like at breakfast time or at lunch or whatever. So
okay.
Yeah.
Can I hop in and ask a question? So,
yeah,
the repeated neutral exposure.
Yeah.
Great. Love that. But as a parent, I think of, okay, then that means I'm essentially building their plate for them. And one of the things that I remember as growing up, especially, is giving them choice. Right. Here's, there's like 6, 7, 8 different items, all different colors, all the, textured, whatever. And they can choose though of that. So what you're saying is that can you talk about, what happens there where you want to give them choice, but then you're also giving them repeated neutral exposure to these options? Practically.
Yeah. Such a good question. So sometimes when I talk about this, parents think, oh, I just give them whatever they want. Like, that doesn't seem very healthy. And that's definitely not what I'm saying. So definitely the choice is good. Are you thinking of more like a buffet style where you have options on the table and they can choose from it?
Well, I mean, my kids are a little bit, well, except for, the young ones. So the range of the kids, when they're young, you're almost always, you're building their plate for them. You're giving, sometimes they don't even have, they've got the 3 or 4 options that you've got, and that's what they're eating. But as they get older, giving them the freedom to choose what's on there. They've got, let's say we have 4 vegetable options, 1 starch, whatever. And you're going to have at least 2 of these veggies. You choose whichever one. That's what I'm referring, because my kids are at the age now where I'm not really building their plate for them. I'm giving them the autonomy and freedom to make good informed choices built on the practices that we've had in their lives up till this point. That's where I'm saying, there's a point where it kind of has to cross over, right? Again, because of my age and stage of a 7-year-old, and a 7-year-old's harder. I think I need to still guide him. The 10-year-olds are pretty good right now, and the 13-year-old, well, it's hit and miss. So.
Yeah, that's such a good, I love that example of like a little bit of structure. So yeah, you can have 2 veggies. You can choose from this set that I've made, not 2 of any vegetable that you want, but 2 of what I have already bought from the grocery store and prepared. So that's a really good example of like a little bit of structure with freedom and autonomy.
Okay.
I really, really like that. And it's still giving them repeated neutral exposure because it's still available, even if they don't choose it. Okay. So yeah, I really, really like that approach. And I think that definitely as they get to 10, 12, like ideally they're also involved in like food decisions and some of the labor. So definitely by 10 or 12, like they could be helping with prepare meals or like setting the table, or making some choice about, I don't really like carrots, but could we have like peppers and cucumber or whatever the thing is. Or, I really don't like cooked veggies, but I'll have them raw, but have some choice in what you're making as a parent. There's just such a fine line between a kind of over catering, like making them exactly what they want every time, and helping them learn to try new foods or expand their diets a bit gradually and without too much pressure. So that is a bit of an individual parenting decision. And I try to kind of work through there with parents, like, how accommodating do you want to be as a parent? Because it involves extra labor and it involves sometimes making multiple meals. Not everybody wants to do that. And it's not ideal for getting them to kind of expand their horizons in terms of food. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to, let's say you're starting out and you're introducing foods to your child and you're wanting to make sure that they're getting good choices, and they're really early on in food, but then also starting to get to that toddler stage where they're wired to test boundaries, they're wired to push back, they're wired to refuse, and so that can be hard, right, for a parent. So can you talk about how can a parent establish again that healthy relationship with food at that age?
Yeah, totally. So there are developmental stages of neophobia and neophilia. So neophilia is where, like, oh, I'm just going to try everything. I'm going to give it, like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't bother me. I'm just going to put it in my mouth and eat it no matter what, including dirt or Play-Doh or whatever it is.
Yeah, the baby's starting to do it.
Yes.
You give her something, she just puts it. It's the first thing is
Put it
right
in
to
her
her mouth. Yeah, that's it. That's test their world. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry.
So that is a window of real opportunity. So up until about 18 months, I'd say. So between that, like 6 months where you're really setting solids to about 18 months where they start to get picky, or they start to test boundaries, I guess it's like the language used. So that window is really great for kind of offering them lots of different textures, lots of different flavors, so that they enter that toddler period with tons of options that they are already familiar with. Previously, parents would just do purees, for example, like from, in the first year, say. And we know that exposing them to different kinds of textures and flavors can be beneficial for preventing that real pickiness later on.
Oh, really? At what age does that start?
So even from 6 months, so not doing,
okay.
So there's some research showing, like, if you only do puree, which some babies do have like higher risk of choking, or like there might be medical reasons to only do purees, but for a healthy term baby and, everything's looking good, like they can eat different textures right from 6 months. Okay. Keeping in mind some choking hazards like grapes and hot dogs and stuff. Hot dogs are a theme of this conversation. But lots of different lots of different textures can help kind of delay or prevent picky eating in toddlerhood. So that's kind of the first thing. Once you get to that, like 18 months to 2 or 3, they are really testing your boundaries. So this is more where parenting structure you can have some flexibility about the way you want to approach it. Just as an example, for my own daughter, like we did have a rule of, if you throw food on the floor, then the meal's over. Like you can't, like, I think we just say food is not for throwing.
Right.
Food is for eating. Food is not for throwing. That was kind of like the thing we kept repeating. And if you throw food, that's the end. So, clean you up, you go out of the high chair. For some parents, that's too strict. And for other parents, that's not strict enough. So people just differ in their approach. But that repeated neutral exposure is really the main way. And then the role modeling of, you yourself eating whatever your toddler is eating, so that they can see, like, okay, mom's eating this, whatever it is, burrito. It must be okay to eat. And it's safe, it's yummy. I can see from her expression that she's enjoying it. All these pieces that we get from role modeling.
Are you a dad who feels like you're juggling a million things at once? Balancing work, family, and personal goals can be overwhelming. But what if there was a solution? That's why we created our new fatherhood community called Dad Mentor. For over 20 years, Dad Central has built practical tools to help dads. We understand the challenges you face and provide the support you need to thrive. The biggest complaint we hear from dads is there's no dedicated support for their specific needs, but not anymore. Our new community, called Dad Mentor, is here to transform your fatherhood experience. Imagine feeling in control, staying calm and patient when your children misbehave. Picture yourself connected to your children, guiding them with confidence and watching them succeed. When you join Dad Mentor, you'll have access to a community of like-minded dads committed to their dad journey, just like you. You'll also get the Dad's Roadmap. This is a step-by-step plan to help you go from unsure to unstoppable as a dad. Monthly masterclasses and Q&A sessions. You'll get answers and know exactly what to do straight from experts. Monthly group meetups that connect dads over common topics. A dad's resource library. Curated webinars, podcasts, or guides built by Dad Central to help you grow as a parent. And finally, you'll also get exclusive members-only offers and events. Now, many dads do try to do this fatherhood thing alone, only to find themselves trapped in frustration and strained relationships. Then they may turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms like drugs, alcohol, or other distractions, leaving their family and their own well-being at risk. We don't want you to reach that point of regret. Take steps to invest in you and your family today. Join Dad Mentor and go from stressed, tired, and overwhelmed to confident, calm, and connected. Join us today by going to dadcentral.ca/dads.
What I'm wondering, Ed, you want to hop in? Or
I wanted to just jump in. A little while back, you talked, well, a lot of what you've shared makes me think about, for many adults, we like to diet, go on diets, and they talk about how food and emotions are linked.
Mm-hmm.
Do you share that same sort of philosophy with when you tell parents, kids and emotions and foods are linked? And if you could just share a little bit about that.
Yes, 100%. This is really a key thing that I talk to parents about, is the way that, so there's various things, the way that you feel as a parent about your own body. So do I feel positive about my body? Do I, do I not like parts about my body? Do I, am I on a strict diet where, I'm feeling deprived about food? All those things will also get past, like your kids will notice them. So for moms, that can mean, like looking in the mirror and not feeling positive about about your own body. That can be passed on to daughters or sons, I think. So that's one part, is kind of body image and the messages we tell kids about, bodies. And then the other part is definitely emotions and food. So as much as possible, the name of the game is neutrality. So what tends to happen in our culture is, for good reasons, for best of intentions like nutrition and health, we kind of elevate some foods and we devalue other foods. So some food is junk food and some food is healthy food. And it's okay. Like in some senses it's true. Some food has nutrients and nutritional value and other foods have less nutritional value. But if we kind of do that, we're setting up this perspective or like an attitude towards food where some foods are okay to eat and some foods are bad or wrong to eat. And that can really, that kind of hierarchy, it can make kids believe that it's a chore to eat healthy foods that we're supposed to be eating. And it's a secret pleasure, a guilty pleasure to eat foods that we're not supposed to be eating. And that can really do a number on us, like on our relationship, going back to that relationship with food, where, we feel bad about ourselves when we eat foods that we're not supposed to be eating, or, we attach like a moral value to it. And that can set up what's called the restrict binge cycle, which is a whole other thing where, you go on a diet and then it maybe works for a few weeks and then you just feel so deprived. And then you kind of binge, and then that ends up kind of backfiring. So this is all a big kind of history or background of like emotions and food, but it is a huge subject, and it's definitely one that parenting plays a big role in, for sure.
Well, and I'm glad you shared, because I want to make sure that our listeners or viewers realize it's not only with parents, but also kids. It also applies to kids also. So I just wanted to have you share about that. So thanks, Drew.
Yeah, my question is now on the flip side. what are the mistakes that parents are making, or what are the things we should not be doing that are going to create unhealthy relationships with food for our children?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the biggest thing that I see with parents, and even with my own parents when they watch my daughter, is that pressure generates counter pressure. So at almost every age, especially starting in toddlerhood and older, but even up to teenagers, if you put pressure on a child to eat vegetables, they're going to push back. And so, just like in that story that I started with, it's completely ineffective and counterproductive to pressure a child to eat when they're not hungry, or when they're feeling overwhelmed, or when they just don't want to eat whatever is in front of them. And the more you pressure them, the more they're going to come back at you with counter pressure. Some kids are really compliant, and so they will kind of follow instructions and will eat. But when there is picky eating, the pressure is not going to solve that reluctance to eat. So that's really the biggest kind of, I guess, like a mistake, even though it's really well intentioned, that I see in practice, is just, oh, my kid's not eating, I will just push harder. And that tends to escalate conflict. And it tends to, maybe this is too strong of language, but I think it tends to kind of violate trust, because your child is really trusting you that they're safe at the table, that you respect their preferences to some degree, within boundaries. And really pressuring them to eat is like, yeah, just disrupting that inherent trust that they have for you. Yeah.
Right. So let me ask, if dads are out there and they have to go to the grocery store, prices are not getting any lower. They're always going up. What are some healthy, cost-efficient foods that you would suggest dads can get for their kids, depending on their age?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a good question. And yeah, it's a really difficult time for buying groceries. So there's a few kind of general tips. One is that the category that has experienced the most inflation is meat. So if you're doing meat every night, you could consider a meat alternative like once or twice a week. They do tend to be like much, much cheaper. So that could look like a black bean burrito. It could look like roasted chickpeas or tofu. It could look like edamame beans in a stir fry. It could look like, tempeh, or, depending on what your family usually eats, like there's probably a meat alternative for you that will save you quite a bit of money. One of the cheapest, most nutritious foods are just lentils. You just buy red lentils. You can add them to a pasta sauce pretty easily. It's kind of like a ground beef alternative. So instead of buying beef, which is notoriously expensive, you're buying something extremely cheap. So that's one of the most kind of cost-effective, nutritious, healthy options out there, are just meat alternatives. It can even just be baked beans, because kids love baked beans usually. So yeah, that's one tip. Another is just to, there are kind of some foods that they kind of seem really healthy, or they're marketed as healthy, but they're not necessarily more nutritious in reality. So you mentioned almond milk, and some people really love almond milk. It's a fine choice, but actually doesn't have as much like protein, for example, as just cow's milk or soy milk. So if you are like a dairy-free family, soy milk's a good alternative, but otherwise just regular cow's milk is fine. So there's a couple tips. Yeah. One other really big thing that I see all the time is just food waste. Like kids are just notorious for wasting food. So that's where it could be hard to do this repeated exposure and not waste, a ton of groceries that you've just bought. So that's where I'd really recommend just the small amounts, so that you're not, piling your kids' plate with these foods that they're unlikely to eat all of. So just starting small and then saying, you can always have more if you're still hungry. That's kind of the main strategy for avoiding too much food waste.
All right. Drew?
Yeah, one of the things that I remember is, the variety of color, like on a plate. And that's one of the things that, as my kids were growing up, we wanted to be mindful of. Are we giving them an opportunity to, one, see the color, which is quite beautiful, but also the different nutrients that are part of that? Is that something that you'd also recommend in terms of, like, when you go to the produce section, the bounty of color that's there and a good variety and mix is advantageous? Is that a positive thing that we should be looking for?
100%. Yeah, for sure. So all produce, like veggies, fruit, whatever it is, plants make these phytochemicals, and each thing has like a different benefit. So the nutrients in like an onion, for example, are going to be different from the nutrients in like spinach or broccoli or peppers, beetroot. So all those different colors kind of indicate different benefits that that those foods have.
Okay, what about frozen versus fresh?
Yeah. Frozen's a great option. Definitely for that preventing food waste too. Like frozen is such a good option. So a lot of people think that frozen is less nutritious than fresh, but actually it's just the same, if not more, because like on a farm, when it's picked, it gets picked at peak ripeness and then immediately frozen. Whereas some fresh fruits and veggies are, picked at like before they're fully ripe and then ripened on the boat or truck or whatever. And so they're actually not picked at peak ripeness. So sometimes frozen fruit and veggies can even have like a small advantage for the that nutritional value and that ripeness. So definitely recommend frozen for sure.
Okay, another very practical question. So we got kids that are active, and a lot of parents have that, and so they're on the road a lot. They're running around. They're going to and fro, and food prep to bring snacks can be challenging. So I guess two parts to the question. One is, what are good, healthy, or reasonable snacks that parents can bring or can use in these moments of tight time? And then the next part of it would be, well, when you're out, what are reasonable, healthier options that you can, especially if you're, every weekend, and, you could be out every weekend for, Friday till Sunday at tournaments. So you're eating out potentially a lot. So those two.
Oh, you're not giving me the easy ones. So yeah, definitely on the road. It can be a little bit more expensive, but any car snacks are great. Like I highly recommend having a bag of snacks that can travel well. So in terms of fruit and veggies, this can look like clementines, apples, pears, like any fruit or veggie that's going to travel well and doesn't need refrigeration. So if you think of like the produce section at the grocery store, a lot of it actually is not refrigerated or doesn't have to be refrigerated. So things like cherry tomatoes and sugar snap peas and all those things in terms of fruits and veggies are great for just bringing in the car. Then there's snacks that are require a little bit of prep. So things like a decent like trail mix, or even like there's like the snack packs of hummus, things like, those are, I think, the main things I'd recommend. Even like a bar. So some kids will be okay with like a Cliff bar, so granola bars are tricky because they really vary in their nutritional value. Like some of them are basically candy bars and others are really great. So finding one, I'm not like sponsored by them or anything, but there's I think it's Nature Valley Lunchbox. So they're like decent for fiber, not too high in sugar. The main ingredient is oats. Anyway, that's the one that I usually recommend to parents because they're nut free, so they can go to school. And anyway, there's a few granola bars that I would be totally happy to recommend. But yeah, those would be a few ideas for car snacks.
Okay. Well, what about on the road? If you're out and you have to, go to Costco and get it. No, I'm just kidding. If you have to, make, your options, what are healthier or better options while you're out traveling?
Yeah, so this is where I actually think the onus is less on parents and more on restaurants. So it really annoys me because like kids menus are always the worst. They're always just like chicken nuggets or cheese pizza, and it's like, yeah, those are fine, but there's very few good options on like kids menus, and those are the cheaper ones, right? So I do kind of challenge restaurants to be a bit more creative with like coming up with kid-friendly meals to offer at restaurants. But yeah, I mean, I would say like you do what you can do in the whatever location you're at. If you can do a little bit of advance like planning, there might be like a Freshie or a Subway or something that's like slightly healthier than the kind of, like, I know I've been to some towns around Ontario where there's just a Tim Hortons, or there's not much there. So I think then like you just kind of have to accept it. Like, it's better to eat than not eat, and especially if your kids are being active, then
it's a one-off, like you said at the beginning, right?
Yeah. And I just would say, like, it's not something to beat yourself up about at all. Like, it's just something to say, like, I'm feeding my kids with the options that are available. And that's a win. Like you were saying at the start, Drew, like, it's a dad win for sure. My kids are fed. They're not hungry. They're like, they're eating. So that I would just say, if that's the situation, don't worry about it. Don't sweat it.
Got it. It's a good way to finish, probably. Don't worry about it. Don't sweat it. I like that. Well, I mean, Ed, unless there's anything more from you.
No, we could go on forever because we're talking about food, so I'm going to hold it off for now.
Well, Anneke, thank you so much. This has been really helpful for me. It's reaffirmed some of the thoughts that I had, but also given me insights that I did not have. And I'm like, oh, that's really important, especially the pressure, the lack of pressure, and the neutrality. I think that's a great word. How can we be neutral, with our children and provide them options and just let them learn and grow and develop, which is hard for me. And me, I'm a structured guy. So, but there's got to be autonomy within that structure. And so I think it's, for me, that lack of pressure is important. So thank you so much for all that you shared. And thank you for this insight. I would love to do another one, but we'll talk more about that another time.
Yeah, it's been really fun. You guys have great questions. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, where can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so my website is thekiwird.com. So RD just stands for registered dietitian. So,
and where the Kiwi come from?
So I'm from New Zealand.
Okay.
Yeah, so I grew up in New Zealand. So New Zealanders call themselves Kiwis.
Yes.
So that's me, thekiwird.com. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and my email is just hello@thekiwird.com. And would definitely recommend reaching out to a dietitian if you're struggling, for sure.
Well, I want to say thank you for taking the time to share with us on our Dad Central Family Day, and continued success, not only as a mother, but also as helping parents, past, present, and future. And let's please stay in touch. And if there's anything we can do to help you along the journey, or any of the parents that you serve, we're more than happy to do that.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you for your time today. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Drew, you're not structured.
No. Yeah, it's your sarcastic voice right there.
No, that's all right. It's all good. So take any takeaway.
I think that neutrality and the pressure is an important takeaway, but really it's healthy relationship with food is, to me, like the ultimate goal. And that's not going to happen, in terms of over a month or two. That's over a lifetime, or at least over the time of raising your children. And so I think that for me is really important, because if you establish the right foundation and develop a healthy relationship with food yourself, but with your children, that sets them up for the rest of their life. And I think that's really critical for me. Healthy relationship with food. How about for you?
Yeah, many takeaways, but I want to share for those who are listening or watching, parents, dads, mothers, food is not only emotional for us, it's also emotional for our kids, right? When we say, you can't eat this, what impact is that having on the child or your children? So I think, and that maybe in a part two, we may want to go a little deeper in that area, but I think really good stuff shared there. And Costco's okay, Drew, all right?
Yeah, that should have been my biggest takeaway. Hey, dad win. In fact, I got support. That is a big dad win. So thank you very much.
No problem. That's fantastic. So as we close out, let's just put it up here. I was going to put up here. There we go. Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, it's a positive impact. And we always want to thank Dove for the support. It's appreciated. And they're not only supporting us, they're supporting families through us. So let's always remember that. We'd love you to touch base with us. Email us. Tell us what you think, what you like, what you don't like. If you have guest suggestions, we'd love to get guest suggestions for the Dad Central Show. Speaking of the Dad Central Show, you can listen and watch episodes at dadcentral.ca/podcast. And we have a pile of free resources on our website and lots of great things on our website continuously. Go to the website, dadcentral.ca. So as always, remember to give yourself grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and we'll see you soon.